Well, I grew up in the church, so that's really all I remember. Um, I went to church a lot, during high school. And that is when we met. But he hadn't really been going to church too much. He grew up a little bit in the Episcopalian church.
Went there as a kid. Kind of was dragged to church, I guess. Didn't really get much out of it, but yeah, I grew up Episcopalian, but hadn't gone in a long time when I did meet my wife.
But we met in high school, dated through high school, got married right out of high school.
Thank God.
We did get pregnant early, so we started our family early, and for years I would take the kids by myself. He didn't have the interest yet to go, but I would just pray for him, every week, and I would continue to go, and then eventually one week.
It was Easter. She invited me on Easter, which is everybody goes to Easter and Christmas, and that's when I went. Again, never got anything out of my church, really, for either one of those ceremonies, but she brought me to the chapel, which was a new church. Similar to this, in a high school gym was where they started, but the energy that happened in that church was something I'd never witnessed before, and it drew me into the point where I continued to go with her after that point.
Yeah, and we had been went to church, every Sunday, and took the kids, and I almost feel like because the church had started to grow and it got pretty big, that we almost got kind of lost in it. Because it was so big, nobody really noticed when we weren't there. And
yeah, it's easy to start missing and slip down that slope when nobody holds you accountable or nobody notices.
Yeah, and so eventually drinking became into our lives, and I think, it's kind of started with, we started missing church, and you get farther and farther away from God, and then you have something like drinking that comes into the mix, and it pulls you even farther, and then we just felt, I think, just a lot of shame. I know I personally felt a lot of shame, and when we did go to church, I just felt like shouldn't have been there, like I didn't belong.
It's exactly where we needed to be. It's exactly where we belong, but you don't think about that when you're diving down the drinking rabbit hole that we went down. It's deep.
Yeah, so we were drinking pretty heavily for a few years, for a long time, and it took, I think, really the birth of our first granddaughter.
Yeah. That was definitely a changer for my wife, and she's always thought of others more than herself her entire life. So to have another baby after come into our lives after such a stretch of us not having kids, which we have 5. Now we have 3 granddaughters. But to have that come in her life, I think, was the deal breaker of she needed to get over the hump of not drinking.
So that's when I finally just had enough. I stopped, and it took a long time for me I still felt that shame, and still wasn't like getting back to God or doing anything for a while, and then I think it was more of like the alcohol I needed like to get out of my body, and I just needed to feel that
clarity again.
Yeah, and then I start feeling like that God he's here. He's always been here. You just need to start really seeking, and so I just started really praying, and I really do feel like the prayer it's just been amazing, and just looking back, you see the answers to prayer that God has had, and even just getting us here.
Yeah, because it's not just the alcohol that we struggled with. It was having to relocate and me accepting a job at the railroad, which she struggled with at first, whether or not to move up here.
Yeah.
It seems like that was just the last piece of the puzzle that needed to happen before God's revealing himself in his grace and all of his goodness to us. It seems like it's all coming into place up here.
Yeah, I really do feel like God put us here. I don't know that we would be as good as we are in our marriage and just with our family if we weren't here.
Well, it was ugly for me. I went in for shoulder surgery, which was the second opportunity, if you will, that God gave me. First was in the hospital with pancreatitis from drinking. Gave me an opportunity to drink and stop drinking there, and I wasn't listening. But after working with the trades my whole life, I got my rotator cuff torn to smithereens, so I had that repaired, which I came to be another blessing from God, just giving me another opportunity. But I was listening this time, so it's been a year sober, and I'm proud of that. And my wife has been sober much longer than that. But I wouldn't be sober without her taking the first step half a decade prior. So thanks, Mom. It was when we started walking after my surgery, and it was at Lakeside Park. We were going out every day. It was fall. The leaves were changing. It was more of a feeling than a feeling of all the ugliness of the past getting purged out or something. I don't know what was happening. I can't really describe it. But I know it was God at work inside me, and I haven't looked back since. I've just been following that feeling and trying to chase it, if you will, and grow at the same time.
Yeah, and for me, I think back when I had stopped drinking is really when I started, like after my body had kind of gone through all of its stuff and God I started getting back into prayer and all of that. That's really, just starting to pray. But really, when I truly felt even the closest to God is when we had moved up here, and I didn't have any family or we hadn't any friends yet, and he was still drinking and
no help whatsoever.
So it really that really brought me closer to God because that's what I had.
But looking back, it's, in how God has worked in our life, I believe anyway, is when I'm weak, she's strong, and vice versa. And proof is in the pudding that he uses our weaknesses and our strengths for his greater good. And now that when you start understanding that, it starts making sense. It makes you want to be a better person as well. I think just that whole last year of, I don't know if it was hell on earth, but it was bad for me. With panic attacks and quitting drinking, I quit smoking at the same time. I found him found God in Lakeside Park, but I'm looking forward to stepping forward and taking the next step, I guess, of being clean of my sins and viewing it differently.
I think for me, it's just seeing the past decade or more, and just seeing how far we've come from there, and getting through the alcohol, and just seeing that this is where we are, and I think it's just the perfect time for this to happen, and I'm just glad that we get to do it together.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I am. It's definitely out of my comfort zone. I'm not usually one to have a spotlight, but I'm excited.
You're in my spotlight.